Okay, so here we have the performance of the US relative to other countries. Life expectancy on the y-axis, spending on the x-axis. Life expectancy choosing kind of like an older population, just to see, okay, how well do we do kind of at the end, at the tail end. And the US does not do well. There's different ways you can look at this, but the US kind of always looks like they are spending more money and getting worse outcomes. Now, defenders of the US system would point out that the US has some difficult populations health wise that they have to take care of. And the US also, the majority of profits for medical technology companies and pharmaceutical companies, like 80%, all come from the US. So the US is essentially subsidizing innovation for the rest of the world. So, with those caveats noted, the bottom line is, though, the US does spend more and has worse outcomes. This is one other way to look at it, and we've kind of increased our spending dramatically without seeing any concurrent increase in life expectancy. However, it could be the case also, though, that after a certain point, you don't get much more bang for the buck. So this is another way of looking at it. Let's say after a certain spending level, there does not seem to be much of a relationship between spending and outcomes. But the U.S., though, even so, the U.S. is actually doing worse. All right. So what's wrong, or why is our system so expensive? There's a numerous issues that you could spend a whole course on, or multiple courses on. And I used to teach health economics, and I begged to not teach it anymore because it is so depressing course to teach. But let's just give the highlights. So we have oligopoly in provision. So what does this mean? So it means that only a few hospitals typically dominate a certain area. They essentially have a massive market share. And hospitals in many states, I believe 36 states, you need to get a certificate of need to open a hospital, where the other hospitals essentially have to approve you entering their market. This would be like if Starbucks got to control whether or not other coffee shops opened near them. Okay, of course they would be reticent to approve anything. So this is we are essentially granting monopoly power, or close to monopoly power, to many of our hospitals. So just to note that these markets are not what you would call a competitive market or a free market. Essentially, we have barriers to competition in the hospital sector. In our pharmaceutical sector, there's only a few firms that dominate the space, that allows them to do things like pay their competitors to not operate on certain drugs, or to not enter the market, and therefore keep their prices high. So we have oligopoly in both the pharmaceutical industry and the hospital industry, which essentially means we do not have a competitive market. Let's just jump down here. Nor do we even have prices. So, in a market, in a functioning market, the price. In our market, the price is revealed oftentimes after the service. You go to the emergency room, you go to the doctor, you get whatever's done, and you don't find out about the bill, what the prices are, until the very end. Now, due to the nature of healthcare, for emergency care, obviously it's impossible to price shop. You're not going to ask the ambulance to go to multiple hospitals to get the best price. But since you don't even know the price, you can't even call up the hospital and get the price for many services. It's really hard to price shop. Also, hospitals vary very significantly in the prices for the same procedure. So a heart surgery at one hospital may cost $80,000, and another hospital may cost $20,000. When researchers have looked, there is no correlation between the price and the quality. So it's not like if the hospital charges more, you're getting a better surgery. How these prices are determined is a Byzantine process that no one really knows exactly how hospitals determine these prices. Let's go back up here. So in general, the way our system works is nobody actually pays. You rarely, is the person who's receiving the service, pay for it. Usually there's a third party, either the government via Medicare or Medicaid, or an insurance company. So when I go to the doctor, when I get something, when somebody tells me to do something, I don't pay for it. The doctor told me to get 2 EpiPens for my kid. So why 2? She said, well, you need 1 in your house, 1 in your car. Well, how much do these EpiPens cost? What does it matter? You're not paying for them. They cost $500. Somebody's paying for that. So the incentive here is to overprescribe, on the doctor's point, overprescribe, overtest, to avoid lawsuits. And since you're not paying for it as the consumer, sure, Do whatever you want. Give me a bunch of EpiPens. Do whatever tests you want to do. Prescribe whatever you want to prescribe. Operate whatever you want. So essentially, all the incentives here are to do as much as possible. Keep doing stuff. Doctors get paid. I'm not saying they're bad faith actors, but they get paid, the more they do. I don't pay for it, so my incentive is go ahead. Now, there is somebody who is paying for it, the insurance company. Their incentive maybe is to get them to do less, and in many ways, they kind of act as a buffer down. But really, as long as the company keeps buying the insurance company is not, it doesn't have as much of incentive to get it down as an individual person would. The government can do things like, since the government is running Medicare, they can negotiate lower prices. So that does happen a little bit, but in general, we have incentives to overdo service. We have a fee for service model instead of a fee for outcome model in terms of our patients. But that's changing a little bit. So I guess that's an area of hope. Okay, and then we have these high sticker prices. So what happens at a hospital is, you get these really, really high prices. There's a couple of reasons for that. Like I said, nobody rarely pays those prices. So the hospital will typically negotiate with each insurance company to get to give them a break on all those prices. Now, the insurance company actually wants the prices to be as high as possible, this posted price, because if you have a high posted price but you get a really low price, say it's posted at $100,000 for a surgery, but you negotiate with the hospital, and the hospital says, okay, for this insurance company, we're going to charge you 20 grand. Then you can go to the company that's buying the insurance for you, the employer that's buying the insurance, and say, look what we did. We bargained them down from 100 to 80. Aren't we doing a great job? So in many ways, the insurance company wants the sticker prices to be high as well. The hospital wants them to be high. So we have these very high sticker prices that almost nobody pays. So the insurance companies all have separate deals, negotiated prices, the government as well. So who pays these high sticker prices? Well, it's people without insurance. Again, this is not necessarily going to be the poor. The poor usually have Medicaid. So this will be like freelancers, people who don't have insurance via their employer. Now, often they can also negotiate themselves a lower price after the bill comes, or they could take the hospital to court, and there's lots of nonprofits that will help them get the lower sticker prices. But in principle, they're the ones who have to bear these high sticker prices. Okay, so that's how our system works. It's it's characterized as a free market, but it's not a free market in any sense, really. You have oligopoly here, you have no prices here. It's just kind of a system that has developed over time, that has all these built-in things that are going to drive up the prices, drive up the cost. Okay, so let's look at our healthcare market at something where it is actually a normal market. All right, and that will be services where the customer actually pays the physician. So if we look at these markets will be for plastic surgery. So here's all these different things you can get, all different plastic surgery. I don't know what all of them are, but I've only had about half these. Just kidding. Okay, so plastic surgery, the insurance isn't going to pay. You have to pay out of pocket. And there are lots of different service providers since it's not an emergency service, okay? So you can kind of shop around in terms of plastic surgery, which is going to get me the best deal. Let me look at the reviews to see if they're good. And so here we have inflation, the average inflation rate over the time period in question, 98 to 2016. So the average inflation is prices have gone up by about 47% in most markets. This is not medical care. This is how much have gone up for food, clothing, cars, whatever. This is just general inflation. Medical services have more than doubled this. So this is the problem. This market is exploding in cost. Hospital services in particular have really gone up in price in this time period. But when we look at all these plastic surgery ones where we actually have, the people paying skin in the game, people paying for what they're getting, almost all of these have actually increased less than inflation, or even gone actually and down in absolute terms. And so, this is an area where the system is actually working, although you can argue about the efficacy or the usefulness of these services. But I'm just pointing out the difference between a market with free entry and free exit to our actual market which has all these issues: oligopoly over physician-induced demand and opaque pricing. You know, it has these huge increases over time. All right. So the American system, it's American system, employer-sponsored health insurance. That was a quirk of history. Because of the oligopoly and kind of the price reveal later, and then physician-induced demand, we have explosion in prices over time. I mean, there are other reasons as well. I'm just highlighting kind of some of the reasons why they've gone up. We are left with a very expensive system that doesn't do well in terms of outcomes. It's not giving us actually better health. Now, that's not to say it isn't high quality. If you have employer-sponsored insurance, you typically have pretty high quality healthcare. I mean, and we can see this as many wealthy foreigners will actually come to the U.S. for their treatment. So it's not like we don't have high quality care. It's just expensive and not accessible for the majority of the population. And so what we're left with is this sense, taking all these markets together, we're left with the sense that the system isn't working that well. That housing is not working for people, tuition is not working for people, and healthcare is not working for people. And so there's the perception that these three very, very important markets are exploding in cost and not really delivering what they should be delivering. And so it's a massive problem. As I said, I think probably the housing market is the easiest to solve. These other markets are more difficult, although there has been some movement on in healthcare. The pricing is becoming more standardized. I believe there was a bill that is forcing hospitals to reveal their pricing and release their pricing, and there's an effort to make it more standardized. There is we have some competition coming from abroad in pharmaceuticals that maybe will drive the price down, and then the big tech is getting into the healthcare sector, and so with tech typically disrupts an industry and brings the cost down and brings more efficiency, and so perhaps big tech will help out with some of these issues, although obviously the technology companies bring their own set of issues. But anyways, just to note also, so what's a potential solution for this system? Many people may say, well, why don't we just do Medicare for all, which is the position of many people. What I'm talking about here is the explosion in cost. So if you do Medicare for all, you still have the cost issues. It's still expensive. You're just switching who pays for it. You're essentially from the employer and the worker to the government paying for it. Now, you could argue that Medicare, if you have Medicare for all, you would have similar abilities, like in the beverage model, to get those costs down, to kind of force those costs down in terms of either directly forcing them down or through price controls. But as it stands, if you just switch to Medicare for all without additional policies or additional policies within that to move the price down, you're essentially just it's not a solution to the problem I'm identifying, which is an increase in the cost. You're just switching who pays. Same thing with the college. That's not to make a value judgment on the policy or not. I'm just pointing out what I'm talking about is a price explosion, a cost explosion. All right. That's the end of this lecture. Moving on to the inequality lecture.